Hello, welcome back to another story with Rob. This time we have Little Miss Fickle, going back to the Mr. Men and Little Miss. And this one was a Scout Job Week supporter from back in the day and cost 60p. Wow, wonder if you can buy a book for 60p now. Who knows? By Roger Hargreaves, 1984, first published. There we are. So this is about Little Miss Fickle. So if you think you have a little miss, then make sure to like and subscribe to this one. And let's dive right in. See what Little Miss Fickle gets up to. Would you like me to tell you a story? If you were Little Miss Fickle, you'd say yes. And then you'd say no, and then you'd say yes again. She was one of those people who just couldn't make up their minds, ever, about anything. There she is. Little Miss Fickle lived in Dandelion Cottage on the outskirts of Sunnytown, and she lived right next door to her best friend, Little Miss Neat, who lived in Two Pin Cottage. One Monday, Little Miss Neat and Little Miss Fickle went out to lunch in Sunnytown. "I'll have the soup to start with," said Little Miss Neat to the waiter as she looked at the menu, followed by the fish. "So will I," said Little Miss Fickle. But after the waiter had written down the order, Little Miss Fickle looked at the menu again. "No, I won't," she said. "I'll have the salad, followed by the meat." The waiter crossed out the first order and wrote down the second. "On the other hand," continued Little Miss Fickle, "I won't have anything to start, and then I'll have the eggs." The waiter sighed. An hour later, when the waiter had worn out 3 pencils and 4 order pads, Miss Fickle finally decided to have the soup, followed by the fish. And the waiter brought the soup. Little Miss Fickle looked at it. "I'm not hungry," she said. It was at that moment that the waiter decided he was going to be a bus conductor instead of a waiter. On Tuesday, Little Miss Fickle went to buy a hat. "I want a new pink hat," she announced. The salesgirl brought her 2 pink hats to choose from. "I'll have this one," said Miss Fickle, after she had tried them both on. "Certainly, madam," replied the salesgirl, and put them in a hat box. "On the other hand," said Little Miss Fickle, "I think I'll have the other one." The salesgirl took the first hat out of the hat box and put the second hat into the hat box. "But," continued Miss Fickle, "I think the first hat suited me better, don't you?" The salesgirl didn't say anything as she took the second hat out of the hat box and put the first hat into the hat box, and she handed the hat box to Little Miss Fickle. Miss Fickle looked at her. "Do you have any blue hats?" she asked. It was at that moment that the salesgirl decided she was going to be a secretary instead of a salesgirl. On Wednesday, Little Miss Fickle went to the butcher's. "I'd like some sausages," she said. "Beef or pork?" asked the butcher. "Pork," replied Miss Fickle, and the butcher wrapped up the pork sausages. "But beef would be nice," said Little Miss Fickle. The butcher unwrapped the pork sausages and wrapped up some beef sausages. "On the other hand," continued Miss Fickle, "chops would be better." It was at that moment that the butcher decided he needed a holiday. But on Thursday, guess what happened? Little Miss Fickle disappeared. Little Miss Neat had seen her pass Two Pin Cottage on the way into Sunnytown, but she didn't come back. She didn't come back on Friday either. So Little Miss Neat went looking for her. She met Mr. Muddle. "Have you seen Little Miss Fickle?" she asked anxiously. Mr. Muddle looked at her. "Have I been for a little tickle?" he inquired. "Oh, Mr. Muddle," she said, and hurried on. Mr. Muddle all in a muddle. She met Mr. Forgetful. "Have you seen Little Miss Fickle?" she asked him. Mr. Forgetful thought. "Well," she said, "have you?" Mr. Forgetful thought. "Have I what?" he asked. "Oh, Mr. Forgetful," she said, and hurried on. But could she find Little Miss Fickle? No, she could not. Nobody had seen her. The Sunnytown Public Lending Library has 19,999 books. On Saturday afternoon, Little Miss Fickle reached up and took one of them down from a shelf. "I'll take this one," she thought to herself. On the other hand, she thought to herself, looking at the book next to it on the shelf, "perhaps I'll take this one." Going through all those books, she placed the first book back on the shelf and took down the other one. It was the 19,999th book she had chosen. She'd been in the library for 3 days choosing a book. 3 whole days choosing one book. And she went home carrying it. That Saturday afternoon, Little Miss Neat was in the garden of Two Pin Cottage when Little Miss Fickle walked past. "Where have you been?" she cried. "To the library," replied Little Miss Fickle. "For 3 days?" exclaimed Miss Neat. "Well," explained Little Miss Fickle, "I wanted to choose the right book." And she held it up. And then she stopped and looked at it. "Oh, bother," she said. "I've read it." After all of that, 19,999 books, she picked the one she'd already read. Little Miss Fickle. The end. There we are. Little Miss Fickle by Roger Hargreaves. Got all the Little Miss on the back. So as this is quite an early one, not many Little Miss there at all. There's a lot more now. So thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you next time for more Stories with Rob. Bye bye.